Good evening and welcome to my channel, Jayla Bamba. In this presentation, I'll be talking about the second chapter of the book, Drug, the Science and Culture Behind Psychotropic. In the first presentation, I talked about the first chapter, and if you are curious to know about that, you have to check out my presentation, the first presentation, and then if you are not satisfied with that, you just go ahead and check the book itself. But I think it's worth reading and worth sharing. It talks about a very important thing in the field about psychotropics and also about religion, Genesis, and how it's connected with the psychedelic plants, and that's something you have to read about yourself. But I am just going to present in this chapter. I'll be talking about what actually the author talked about. And before that, I'll tell you who is the author. The author is Richard J. Miller. He is a British national. He was born and raised in England, graduated with a PhD from the University of Cambridge in biochemistry, joined the faculty of the University of Chicago, transferred to the Department of Pharmacology at Northwestern's Feinberg School of Medicine, published hundreds of scientific papers. In the preface, the author states, "We take psychotropics daily. We drink caffeinated beverages, smoke cigarettes, and many other things. And psychotropic drug, as he defined, is a chemical substance that enters the brain and alters the way it operates." He also defined consciousness, and it says it's an expansive property that emerges from the complex behaviors of the cells that make up the physical substrate of the brain. It's similar to what the discoverer of DNA, as has been reported, said, who defined behavior as a complex interaction of our bodies at cellular levels. Consciousness, according to the author, is limited. It's similar to Plato's allegory, and conscious reality is nothing but a shadow to a greater one. In this chapter, which is the second chapter of the book, he's talking about LSD and many other ergot alkaloids, derived alkaloids, ergot alkaloids derived substances that have been put to use in the modern pharmacology. He started the chapter with a section he called Bicycle Day. We'll know why he called it that. He talks about the pharmaceutical industry, the Swiss pharmaceutical industry that was mainly centered in Basel, a town that's on the banks of the Rhine River, bordered by 3 European countries. Alfred Kern and Edward Sandoz created the chemical company Kern and Sandoz in 1886. It started by making and marketing dyestuff. Kern and Sandoz became Sandoz and started pharmaceuticals. They prepared and sold analgesics, antipyretics, such as antipyrine, their first most marketed one. In 1917, Sandoz created its first pharmaceutical company that focused on researching novel products with a focus on nature-derived drugs. They succeeded in isolating and marketing ergotamine for the treatment of migraine. Alfred Hoffmann, a young Swiss chemist with a PhD from the University of Zurich, got interested in the branch and joined Sandoz. Albert Hoffmann initially placed his focus on isolating cardiac glycosides from the Mediterranean squirrel plants. He focused his interest in the semi-synthetic derivative of lysergic acid, an intermediate biosynthesis of all ergot alkaloids, including ergotamine. In 1938, he synthesized lysergic acid diethylamide and called it LSD 25. 25 because it's 25th analog he came up with from ergot alkaloid based bases. He thought it might be used as an analeptic, respiratory stimulant. Hoffman experienced an unpleasant, intoxicated state. He quoted, as quoted in the book, and Hoffman attributed such effects to having absorbed the chemical preparation through the skin. He suspected that there is more to the substance he has just synthesized. He picked up his research in 1943, self-experimented by ingesting 0.25 milligrams of LSD. Tartrate diluted in 10 cc's of water, which is 10 times more than what elicits psychedelic effects. Other executives from the Swiss pharmaceutical company had to trip out on the substance biking home on April 1943 on April 19, 1943 to verify the veracity of his statements. It has become a celebrated day. That April 19th became, according to the author, became a celebrated day. In this next section, he talks about ergot and its alkaloids. Ergot Claviceae purpura family is a fungus, a major molecular component of LSD. It is a fungus that attacks crops, mainly rye and related grains. Eating ergot contaminated crops can cause a person ergotism, a very serious disease that can cause gangrene, convulsions, hallucinations, among other things. It is also rich in chemicals that affect the nervous system and has an abundance of active alkaloids. The use of ergot in obstetrics dates back to 10,000 BC, to 1000 BC. It is still a major application in the field. First accurate description of ergot occurred in 1582 by Adam Lonitzer, a German botanist. Contaminated foods, especially rye, caused ergotism. Two forms of ergotism described in the book, gangrenous and convulsive. The difference might be affected by the ergos, which is the type of ergots, and the environmental conditions that affected that type of ergot. There is the gangrenous ergotism, and that one is caused by extreme constriction of blood vessels that causes a lot of pain and may cause the limbs to fall. They become gangrenous and necrotized, and they might even fall. The convulsive form of is excruciating muscle spasm and diarrhea accompanied by hallucinations. The pain associated with ergotism became known as Saint Anthony's fire or Sacer Ignis, sacred fire, and it was known in the Middle Ages. And you guessed it, in the Middle Ages, the word was poor, especially in those areas where it was cold and humid and people, and then there came those winds, and that was in Europe. Most poor people got affected by that. It was reported that in the Middle Ages, in those times, almost like 12,000 people died of the disease. An order of monks established the hospital order 11th century AD that cared for such people. Similar to what happened with the sacred mushroom, modern science had to apply its microscopic curiosity to gain knowledge, insights, and insights into how ergot works, how it causes ergotism, and how a cure can be developed and how it can be successful. Its active chemicals have to be identified. Some of its medicinal benefits and chemical components have been known early in history. In 1808, Dr. John Stern from New York described ergot preparations used in stimulating labor. It was also used to induce abortions in early pregnancies. Major turning point for this fungus was 1904 when Henry Dale, 29 years, joined the Burroughs Wellcome Research Lab. Nobel prized for his identifying neurotransmitters and receptors. He was the first guy to do so, to identify neurotransmitters and receptors. Henry Dale, together with George Barger, another fellow scientist from Burroughs Wellcome, identified multiple ergot extracts and their effects on the blood pressure. They crystallized ergotoxin, a pure extract of ergot. That's what they thought. But later it was proved that ergotoxin was a mixture actually of three alkaloids. Real progress in ergot research came with Sandoz. In 1917, Albert Hofmann isolated ergotamine, the main active chemical in ergot, and the first pure isolated ergot alkaloid. The chemical structure was determined in 1951. A synthesis occurred in 1961. Ergotamine was found to be a powerful vasoconstrictive, to have a powerful vasoconstrictive effects. They harnessed for the treatment of migraine in therapeutic dosages. Side effects reminds us, or was reminiscent of, as the author said, of gangrenous ergotism. Conclusion: they concluded ergotamine might have been what caused ergot toxicity. Ergot alkaloids' effects happen because of their interaction with biogenic amines, neurotransmitters, epinephrine, norepinephrine, serotonin, 5-hydroxytryptamine, and dopamine, and their receptors. And that's why they have such effect. Effects vary with ergot alkaloid and the target receptor. Ergotamine is all in one. All major components of ergot alkaloids. Ergot alkaloids are derived from amino acid L-tryptophan, the largest known fungal group. Ergotamine is structurally composed of an ergoline lysergic acid found in all ergot alkaloids. It is water-soluble and L-proline containing complex tripeptide 3 amino acid moiety. Ergopeptine are abundant in nature, but only ergotamine is the only one currently used in medicine. When even minimally structurally altered in the lab, they can yield clinically useful semi-synthetic drugs. Ergotoxin, when slightly chemically modified, it yielded brocriptine with a unique dopamine receptor activating properties for the treatment of pituitary prolactinoma and hyperprolactinemia. Ergoline lysergic acid has also yielded very important clinical drugs. Example, ergonovine, ergometrine, used for uterine stimulation, delivery, and placental expulsion, and also for postpartum prophylaxis, hemorrhagic prophylaxis. Lysergic acid was found to be a rich field in pharmacology, hence for pharmacological research, hence Albert Hofmann and his colleagues at Sandoz interest. In 1943, and 1943 marks the synthesis and identification of the unique properties of LSD and its mechanism of action. Ergot, the natural occurring product, has a strong biological effect with some hallucinogenic effects that are similar to Albert Hofmann's synthesized offspring, LSD. The author asks the question: have there been ergot alkaloids, naturally occurring ones, similar in effects to the semi-synthesized LSD 25, that also have been used for entheogenic purposes? Remember how he was interested in the fact that religions sprang from people being high on such substances. To know that, we will have to know about little round things, to which he dedicated the next section. Now let's see what he talks about. Florentine Codex is a record of facts about the Aztec culture collected by Bernard Sahagan Marano. Marano is a Jewish person who has been converted to Christianity but kept his Jewish belief secret. So he's a clergyman, and those people were brought to the New World, to Latin America that we know now, to convert people and teach them and quote quote civilized. He moved to the new conquered world in 1521 with the Spaniards. He learned the indigenous language and taught them Latin and Spanish. In his codex, he mentioned the usage of numerous plants and fungi by the natives for entheogenic purposes. If you remember, entheogenic, it means anything that a person takes in and makes him feel as if he were God or one with God. Oliloquy seeds, or the little round things, have been used as mind-altering substances and entheogens by the natives, and its use is still current among those people. These might be the seeds of the morning glory, a climbing vine with bright multicolors, color flowers. In 1959, Gordon Wasson sent a sample to Albert Hofmann to find out about its chemical structure. And this guy has a great interest in these things, you know. We have seen that in chapter 1. The seeds contained ergot, alkaloid ergine, and isoergine, but with similar properties to those Hofmann first synthesized and tested on himself as he was cooking up his LSD-25. They have weak hallucinogenic effects. To understand more about the effects of ergot alkaloids and the use of some of them in the religion as entheogens, he takes us to Greek mythology in the mysterious mysteries section. Persephone, also known as Proserpine, the daughter of Demeter, the goddess of fertility, was kidnapped by Hades at the underworld. Her mother was so devastated and searched for everywhere and got sad and obsessed with finding her daughter, to the point that she neglected her responsibilities towards Earth, and the Earth started dying. Helios, the sun, the god of the sun, or the sun god, had to let her know that Hades kidnapped her daughter. The rule was that whomever ate in captivity in the underworld cannot leave. Persephone ate half a pomegranate, so Olympus intervened and mediated the solution. She can go up, but returned to the underworld for 4 months, during which time the earth gets neglected again. Persephone started a cult in Ulysses, near Athens, a temple for worship. The rituals last 9 days a year in September. Members fast, use special words, and drink kykeon, And this is what he wanted to highlight. Kikion was a drink that he said was made of barley and mint. They entered the inner sanctum, Telestrion, and were sworn to secrecy under the penalty of death. Hoffman and Wasson claimed that Kikion might have been barley infected, that the barley used in Kikion might have been ergot infected. Again, the psychoactive component of LSD is the psychoactive ingredient. There are other substances in nature that are close in chemical structure to LSD. Have they been used in entheogenic experiences of the people by the people? And that's what he wants to know. So he said, let's visit the Mayans and see, know some more about their Mayan mushrooms. Mushrooms also have been used and mentioned in poems from the highlands of Guatemala. Bernard Sahagan, the Marrano we talked about in his Florentine Codex, reported that natives used mushrooms in their entheogenic rituals. Religious rituals for healing and praying. Such mushrooms grow on animal dungs, and were called neonatal by the native and translated to god flesh. Spanish forbade the use of mushrooms in religion because they were distractions from the Catholic faith. You know how they converted people to Christianity and then say, you are not going to use that because that distracts you from your faith. So, although it was outlawed, those practices went underground. Anthropologists revived interest in the mushroom in the 20th century. They wanted to identify neonatal, the same way they wanted to find out about the soma, and was the soma fly agaric based, etc. In 1940, the Austrian and Mexican anthropologist Blas Pablo Reco and Harvard ethnobotanist Richard Schultes got samples of neonatal used by some natives in distant parts of the country. They initially linked it to the genus of psilocybe. At the same time, people in USA ingested liberty cap from the wild accidentally and had psychedelic effects. Another anthropologist, Jean Johnson, observed ceremonies where mushrooms were used by the shamans, curanderos in Huatla, to get the hallucinogenic entheogenic effect and allow them to cure the sick. In 1952, Gordon Wasson not only observed but participated in those ceremonies. He published his experience in an article in 1957 in Life magazine. The author states that Gordon Wasson almost single-handedly introduced psychedelic mushrooms to the modern world and Europe. He befriended a curandera in the region of Huatla. She provided him and his wife with mushrooms to take part in the mushroom nighttime ceremonies of intoxication and healing rituals. Huatla became a pilgrimage to people seeking such experience. Gordon Wasson's interest in the mushrooms stemmed from his interest in ethnobotany and ethnopharmacology. He looked for allies for his project. Roger Haim, a French mycologist, helped identify and cultivate psilocybe mushroom species used by curanderos and curanderas in nighttime ceremonies. Albert Hoffman was the other ally. Samples were sent to Sandoz for cultivation and analysis. Hoffman identified two ingredients he thought were the psychoactive elements of Psilocybin mexicana. Psilocybin and psilocin, 4-phosphoroxy-N and dimethyltryptamine, and 4-hydroxy-N and dimethyltryptamine, respectively. He started working on synthetic forms, then isolated what he thought psychoactive agent from another mushroom, psilocybe basistis, and isolated two chemical basistin and norbasistin 10 years later. Basistin and norbasistin were psychoactive, he found out by self experimenting as usual. He gave a powder synthetic sample to Maria Sabina, the curandera from Huatla, that allowed Gordon Wasson and his wife to participate in her mushroom night ceremonies. What is the chemistry behind their effect? We'll find out. Now, hallucinogenic tryptamine, this is the next section. When dephosphorylated, psilocybin becomes psilocin, 4-hydroxy-N, N-dimethyltryptamine, the responsible chemical compound for psychedelic effects. Sympathetic arousal, dilated pupil, synesthesia, seeing sound and hearing colors, etc. The skin of buffalo merino's toad has a similar compound, bufotenine. Bufotenine, a positional isomer of psilocin and the hydroxyl group, is a different ring in a different ring position. So if you remember, as kids, they told you about that little kid, little princess that kissed a frog, and the frog turned into a handsome prince. She's probably was affected by that substance. Now, psilocin mushroom, psilocybin mushrooms are saprophytic. It means they grow on dead organic material and widely spread. Now let's talk about the ayahuasca of Indians. We still have to know more about uses of plants-based decoction and other natural products used for their psychedelic effect and entheogenic benefit. We'll have to go with the authors of South America again and investigate reports about a drink used in Brazil, Peru, Ecuador by native South Americans. Ayahuasca, a decoction using extract of vine Banisteriopsis caapi, also called yage or ayahuasca. Lewis Lewin, whose Analinium lewini was named after, mentioned in his Fantastica, a classic survey on the use of and abuse of mind-altering plants. He mentioned this. He self-experimented as usual and declared that is similar to mescaline in a perfect form. He said that ayahuasca is similar to mescaline in a perfect form. I don't understand what he means by a perfect form because this is a quote I said. It means it might be like pure mescaline, no idea. The psychoactive ingredient was isolated in the 1920s by Lewis Lewin and others. Banisteriline or telepatine, identified as beta-carboline alkaloid, also known harmine. Similar substances extracted from Peganum harmala. Lewin tested harmine on humans and by self-experimenting and thought it was psychotropic. In what way? He didn't say psychedelic, he said he thought it was psychotropic. How is ayahuasca hallucinogenic? We'll see. Banisteriopsis caapi is not the only ingredient of decoction. Other plants are added in. For example, Psychotria viridis, leaves, and many other plants, only when these are added when the psychedelic effect. When you put Banisteriopsis caapi by itself, it doesn't do anything. But when you add the other substances, effects happen. The indole alkaloid N and dimethyltryptamine DMT, and related 5-methoxy and N-methyltryptamine 5-meo DMT can be found in all the ingredients added to yacht or ayahuasca. All the other plants have DMT in them, or 5-meo DMT. Or you can find them there or in Banisteriopsis capi to make the decoction. DMT is easily metabolized and its effect lasts minutes. It is substrate to the enzyme monoamino oxidase, which metabolizes most biogenic amines such as 5-hydroxytryptamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, and psilocin. Harmine or harmaline were identified as monoamino oxidase inhibitors. Now, hence the effect. So, Psychotria viridis leaves and other plants contain DMT easily broken down by monoamino oxidase inhibitor, but harmine, the beta carbolin alkaloid, is the monoamino oxidase inhibitor. When these two combine, DMT's metabolism is slowed down. As the metabolism is slowed down, the level of DMT gets higher and the concentration that reaches the brain gets higher, hence the psychedelic effect. Now, let's talk about the small cactus or peyote or badan. The cactus hallucinogen. Peyote. Bernard Sahagan also, if you remember, the Marano with the Florence Codex, also talks about other plants used by the natives, such as the eucalyptus that gave the natives inebriation, he said, that lasts 2 to 3 days, gives them the courage to fight and not feel fear, in addition to visions, visual hallucinations, and euphoria. That's what was reported in his codex. Although discouraged by the Spaniards, it went clandestine. Its use spread to southwest USA. Native Indians who used it for entheogenic reasons had to battle the U.S. government legally. They had to enter into a litigation battle with the government to have it allowed. Now they won the case because it's for their religion. It grows in Mexico, Texas, and Oklahoma. In Mexico, Texas, and Oklahoma. Lewis Lewin was the first to study the peyote cactus and isolated a chemical he deemed responsible for the psychoactive effect and called it anilonium, which is the scientific name for the botanical peyote. He gave a dried sample to Park Davis Drug Company for study. It was determined that mescaline was the psychoactive compound. 3,4,5-trimetoxy beta phenethylamine. It's a complicated name anyway. The mescaline was the psychoactive compound. Effects similar to LSD, DMT, and psilocybin that are tryptamine derivatives. Mescaline is structurally related to phenethylamine and catecholamine, neurotransmitters, epinephrine, norepinephrine, and dopamine. Less potent than tryptamine-derived psychedelics, the effect is derived less potent than tryptamine-derived psychedelics. The fact that it's structurally related to phenethylamine made it important to medicine and psychiatry. Its structural similarities with catecholamines, norepinephrine, epinephrine, etc., made it even more so. Psychedelic effects resemble positive symptoms of schizophrenia. Is the latter a metabolic disorder? Schizophrenia, is it a metabolic disorder? Is transmethylation, just transmethylation went wrong? Chemical reactions went wrong? Do we have indigenous mescaline-like product, indigenous psychotogens, that's what they call them. Psychotogens is psychotogens. A search started for such indigenous compounds. Now, they don't want to just find out about those substances that call the psychedelic effect. They want to understand what is that psychedelic effect that comes on its own in the brain. Is it indigenous? Do we have similar substances? We have the receptors in them. We have similar neurotransmitters. So they want to say, the question is it something that's metabolic related, that is bodily chemistry related? And that's what the next section is talking about, the molecule of madness. In 1950s, British psychiatrists Humphrey Osmond and John Smithies thought that the cause of schizophrenia might be a compound that is both epinephrine and mescaline-like instruction, has hallucinogenic properties. They thought they found it in schizophrenic. Such compounds, Smithies believed, is caused by abnormal methylation that yields abnormal metabolites of catechol or indolamine, similar in structure to known psychedelic agents. Osman used nicotinic acid in his trial. He conducted in Canada to clear off the abnormal effect of the abnormal transmethylation and inhibiting the formation of psychotogens. In 1962, Friedhoff and Van Winkle detected, with the help of chromatogram, pink spots in the urine of schizophrenic. They attributed to 3,4 dimethoxyphenethylamine, DMPEA. The spots were not detected in the control group. They said, okay, that must be it. That must be the substance of madness. That must be the chemical that caused the madness. They detected it by a chromatogram. The compound is similar to mescaline, but it's inactive. It was not. They said it's not hallucinogenic. It still was noted as biomarker for abnormal methylation and psychotogen and indigenous precursor for schizophrenia. Debates were ignited, pros versus cons, till it was declared that the pink spots they found out were actually nothing but side effects for chlorpromazine most schizophrenics were on. In 1969, the author became a founding member. The author, I'm talking about Richard J. Miller. That's what he stated. He became a member of the British Association for Schizophrenia after he attended a meeting organized by Mrs. Gwyneth Hemmings, who believed in orthomolecular psychiatry. February 1969, Alexander Shulgin, a PhD in biochemistry and postdoctoral work in psychiatry and pharmacology, and two other colleagues synthesized 40 analogs of mescaline. Just like what they did with the LSD, they did the same thing with this substance, mescaline. They self-experimented and run human experiment to find out. When they say run human experiment, as the author mentioned, they did some studies on themselves and on their immediate friends. So to find out which analog would act as an indigenous psychotogen, he believed in the psychoactive infinite potential for phenethylamine nucleus as a mescaline and as a starting point for drug development. Phenethylamine nucleus mescaline is psychoactive amphetamine is psychostimulants, and norepinephrine activate adrenergic receptors. Norepinephrine, amphetamine, and mescaline are chemically structurally related. Shulgins believed he could cook up more analogs that are psychoactive by playing around with the closely related chemicals structures of such substances. Just by playing around in chemical nucleus, they could come up with many other analogs that are similar in structure. In 1970, Shulgins and David Nichols synthesized methylene dioxyamphetamine, MDMA, also known as ecstasy, structurally related to both amphetamine and mescaline, but is a different drug. It's an impathogen. It makes them like Molly and very emotional and vulnerable. They developed many analogs almost as hallucinogenic as LSD, and those what became known as design drugs. So it became something else. LSD hit the street as is a section that tells us how LSD went popular and how even it was handed in and sold in pharmacies without prescription. It was marketed as Dilsid for psychiatric use. Werner Stoll, son of the Alfred Hoffman bosses at Sandoz, wrote and published an article about LSD. Sandoz distributed the drug for testing under controlled conditions. Now comes the CIA, and what it did with it, CIA was the first to test it in 1950s, 1960s, as reported in the book in secret projects such as Bluebird, Artichoke, MK Ultra, for coercive persuasion, brain control, and brainwashing, inspired by reports by Nazis' use of mescaline on detainees. According to the book, CIA did not experiment on prisoners, but mental patients and drug addicts as well. They even contaminated water with LSD to bring about madness-like states in their targets. They placed an order so big for LSD with Sandoz that the company was unable to meet the demand. So they sought the help of Eli Lilly Company, a local one, and the CIA became eventually a supplier to infiltrate organized drug crimes. LSD became popularized in psychiatry because it was used as a psychotropic med. And there are so many movies where you see that they have been handing that to have people talk and then to find out a cathartic moment and have them realize what was the cause of their disease and then make them whole again and find out what the disease. But we don't know that cathartic moment that they believe happened. Was it just another delusion? Anyway, so indigenous psychotogen theory of schizophrenia helped in this respect. Osmond used LSD for the treatment of alcoholism. How? No idea. So Timothy Leary, a Harvard psychologist and lecturer who has already been involved in other psychedelics such as psilocybin, decided to add LSD to his repertoire of experimentation. He eventually got kicked out of his position at Harvard, but started a religion-like resort for international freedom, for inner freedom in Mexico. It was closed and he was kicked out again, started another resort, drug and entheogenic experience. The religious experience was inspired and included the use or based on the Tibetan Book of Dead and different states of consciousness. One Flew Over the Cuckoo Nest, I just rewatched it again, as a movie, but it was a book that was published in 1962 about a Stanford creative graduate, Ken Kesey. Um, he was a subject to one of the CIA LSD experiments at a mental hospital where he ended up working as an orderly. This has become inspired him and became had him write the book One Flew Over the Cuckoo Nest, and that was what has become a movie in 1975, known under the same no under the same title, where Jack Nicholson plays the major role of self-committed mental health. He was not self-committed. He was actually a prisoner that was brought to be tested and see if he were actually mentally ill because of his disorderly conduct, etc. So I'll stop here, and we'll talk more about uh, we'll talk more about chapter two, and then I'll talk about chapter three that he called the purple haze, and we'll find out together what he's talking about. Now I'll stop at this point, and hope to see you soon and talk to you soon and hear your comments. And please don't shy off, give me a holler, um, post your comments and your links, and invite me to watch your posts and watch mine. And my posts are mostly, I post everything because I am pro mental health, and mental health is a very important component in societal health as in a whole, and a person's wellness. So see you in my next post. Until then, have a wonderful time.